I want to comment on both of them.
Okay.
I would agree that Number of the Beast is probably my least favorite. It's in his late years, he wrote a series of books which all sort of run together, and it's like one long book where all the same characters are running into each other, just going through time and dimensions any way they can to just like, and it sort of like becomes a mush. The last couple of books, it starts with The Number of the Beast.
It does.
But Farmer's Freehold, I really like. It does have two parts. It's it's a survival in the wilderness story, and it's also a book where he discusses race relations, which is the second part, and that was a major theme for him. I guess maybe the two parts don't fit together that well, but they're both well done, I think, and they're both serious.
They're excellent stories if you separate them. You know, and I kind of wish that you could just chunk the book in half and read this half and read that half. And if you evaluate them separately, sure, but they're not because they're together. It's supposed to be one contiguous plot. It just doesn't work for me.
So let's see what I'm going to talk about. Well, Farmer's Freehold. I noticed that about that. I am one of the, I guess, strange supporters of Number of the Beast, and I do see definitely that it runs together with the subsequent novels, which I think the subsequent ones all run together more than somehow Number of the Beast stands out among those, and it gets long and it gets very, very polemic, and I understand why people don't like it, and to a certain extent I still like it mostly because it's polemic in the way that Heinlein always was polemic, just isn't quite as hidden as well in that particular novel, but that's one of the things that I've always liked about his writing, and so it's just more of a good thing in some ways for me. I mentioned Beyond This Horizon, which kind of, it stops in the middle of the book and then restarts, and in some ways it's kind of right in the middle of the book there's an announcement that, well, really this is all a dream, and then it goes on from there without really addressing the point. And I thought that was kind of strange and didn't like it very much, and I think that's the one I'm going to pick as my least favorite.
Okay.
My least favorite, because I haven't read a lot of the later stuff, my least favorite is Farnham's Freehold, but a little bit, my reaction to it is a little bit different from yours, because I was in college at the time that it came out in its magazine serialization in If, and I read the first installment, and I hated it so much that I never finished it. I thought it was very depressing. Partly it's my taste. These nuclear war Armageddon stories just don't really do much for me. I read the synopses of the later on and decided that I didn't really want to go back and read the rest of it, and it just didn't thrill me at all. My interest in science fiction tends more towards space travel anyway, and so I loved The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which came out later, but Farnham's Freehold just didn't do a thing for me.
You must have really liked Rolling Stones, though.
I haven't read that one.
Well,
That's one of the ones that's in my pile that I will get to someday.
You'll like it.
Well,
I've got all of the juveniles. I'm gradually getting through them.
Let's hope that this is the end about. I hope this is the end about saying things we don't like, because I think most of us like most of what he did. And it's the guy's 100th birthday. We're here to celebrate him. And he did a lot of amazing stuff.
When is his birthday? Isn't it?
July 7th,
July
7th, 2000, 7707.
It was 100 and
Oh.
100 and a half
So we
years.
already have.
Yeah, they had the big deal in Kansas City
July
back in
7th.
last July.
Wow. Hey, that's my niece's birthday.
The reason that I wanted to bring that up, every author has good days and bad days, and part of what, when I was thinking about a panel like this, was talking about the stuff that's really good and the stuff that you can wait to read until later. Because eventually, he's dead. If you really like it, you're gonna run out. So, you know, some of the stuff that's
If you
not
live
quite
long
as
enough.
good. Yeah, if you live long.
But he's actually, about 6 of his books have been published since he died. His wife has gone back and pretty much published a lot of things that had never been published during his lifetime, including a lot of nonfiction stuff. But actually, his very first fiction book, which was rejected at the time, was brought out.
Yep. For us to live.
What has he written?
Something like 40 some odd. Question to that?
Has anybody mentioned the unpleasant profession?
Nope.
Talk about an aptly named book.
That one left so little impression upon me that I don't really remember it all that clearly.
Well,
I know I've read it.
Unpleasant is the word.
Yeah, it was one of those. I remember a couple of books that I just don't like it, but I got through it because it's Heinlein. I kept hoping it would get
story, I
better.
believe.
There's only one Heinlein that I actually didn't finish, which is the last one, For Us the Living. Has anybody else read that?
Oh, true.
Yeah.
I went through
Really
it.
got stuck in.
It was good for a historical thing.
Yeah.
See, this is the first thing. I mean, you could see many of his themes that he developed later in that first book.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really
You
heavy.
can see why they didn't publish it.
Oh yeah, you can also see why
It's
they didn't want it.
interesting.
It was way too much for the time that he wrote
Yeah.
it. It was way too much.
And it also, in terms of writing style, let's face it, the concept of a novel peters out about halfway through, and it's basically a lecture from then on, and you learn
Yeah.
to do better. But yeah, off-screen sex, interracial sex, no way was that going to get published then. No way.
But to a certain extent also,
Nudity.
the lecture was there, and he learned to cover his lectures better later, but the lectures were still, in many cases, very obviously there, but they were fictionalized. He didn't take the actual political situation that he was commenting on. He took something like it that he built in a fictional universe that was a different set of circumstances.
Yeah, Soviet writers became very expert at that.
You know, so as a historical tool,
Yeah.
reading For Us the Living after you've read, I want to say maybe 10 or 15 other works, you'll go, oh, I see bits of this here and this here. So for a student of Heinlein, it's an interesting read for that reason. Now, the next question that I have prepared for you is, if somebody came to you, and they said, I've never read Heinlein before, what would you give them first, and why?
How old is I?
Let's say somebody in college, because the other question that we'll also do for a child.
Boy or girl?
Girl.
No,
It can. There are a lot of people that think that there's a lot of Heinlein that's sexist. So,
Not a question of
and
sex, it's a
and
question of interest.
It's not a matter of what gender are they, but how openly are they raised. Exactly.
that could be a
Yeah,
factor too.
that may be.
No, I don't like it when women are used as sexual objects. You know, if they're a female, if the characters aren't well developed, that's why I stopped reading Heinlein when I was in high school. I read a couple of books and I was like, dirty old man syndrome, and never picked up a Heinlein book again.
There are a lot of people that feel that way. But I think for our
Odd
purposes,
can
trying to
of
split it
worms.
down into, male or female or something like that, I think we're splitting too many hairs with that. I don't think we'll have time.
I've got one that'll do for everybody, I think.
Okay?
Have space that will travel because the reader thinks he knows what's going to happen in the book, and little by little he gets led off in different directions. Even though it does have a conventional happy ending, I will, but it's not. It's not what you think it's going to be when you start out. And I think it's an excellent introduction into the way Heinlein does things.
It's not a bad choice. It has some of the more appealing aliens in that particular book. I think I'd also, for me, if I were recommending, I would ask them, are they happy reading an ostensibly juvenile book like the earlier Harry Potter books? Because those are ostensibly a children's book, and yeah, I use them to read to my kids. I happen to greatly enjoy the first couple of Harry Potter books. that they're labeled juvenile. If somebody can deal with the fact that the books are the juveniles, I certainly would recommend the juveniles first. Citizens of the Galaxy is a good adventure story,
Citizens of the Galaxy is great.
and all of them have a fair amount of his morality in it. I mean, I read them early enough that a lot of what I took as morality for me came out of Robert Heinlein. I mean, I'll admit that's where a lot of how I'm better off dead list.
I think, for some people, stranger might be a good way to start. The question is, the person really ready to, is it the kind of person who's going to throw him or herself into a really substantial thing, or do you want to sort of ease them in with a few short stories? You have to convince them that, hey, I really like this guy and I'm ready to dive deeper.
That's not a bad idea.
Actually, that would be the one that I would, well, that's the one that I have actually recommended, because we're talking about college-age people, and I live in Amherst, and over the last couple of months I have recommended to several people, who have never read any Heinlein. I said Stranger, and for different particular cases. I mean, there's so much in Stranger about so many major topics, and for one reason I was recommending it is because he deals with politics in it quite well.
Yes.
But other people will say, oh, it's a book about relationships, and other people will say it's a book about, several other different things.
It's a book about religion.
A book about religion.
Cannibalism.
Only a little.
Parallel.
Well, I mean, cannibalism in terms of, showing that there are other cultures that do things different ways,
Right.
and you shouldn't be provincial about the way you
That
live
would be
life.
the only reason why I would not recommend it as a first book, because that is something that is a trigger for a lot of people.
It can be. It can be. I have often.
Again, depends on the person.
True.
But we have a question in the back.
What about puppet masters?
See, I was thinking about that. The reason I asked my question of, or said it depends. It depends on what style of reader we're talking to. Not necessarily whether it's a young person or an old person, or a man or a woman, or someone who is in college or not. Depending on where they are in their in their learning. I think it has to do, for me, when someone asks me what should I read, I ask them, well, what do you read? Is this someone who reads to get ideas to think about? Is this someone who reads to get ideas given to them? Is this someone who reads for the adventure and the information or the ideas are secondary? What sorts of ideas, of plots are they going to be interested in more or less? Do I want to give them the best first? And more importantly even than what should I read first, but what should I read second?
That's a very difficult question.
Puppet Master always seems to me too rooted in McCarthy era. I guess it's because I lived through that time. It's so obvious that.
You want to hook them first. What am I reading second? That's a hard one.
The issue of what you give somebody, it really does depend on who you're giving it to. And I'm remembering when I was in high school, I had just begun to actually read science fiction. I'd seen TV shows and stuff like that. And my friend who was kind of much more into it than I was and was recommending things to me, recommended Starship Troopers to me. I read it, I loved it. But a couple of years later, there was an English teacher who had never read any science fiction. And a bunch of guys, I wasn't part of that particular crowd, but they wanted to give her science fiction to try, and she was willing to try science fiction. And they gave her the book that really thrilled them, Starship Troopers. This was a bad choice. She was a Jewish liberal from Newton, and she was horrified by it. I think Stranger might have been a much better choice, and since it was introduce her to science fiction, not introduce her to Heinlein, I think I would have picked The Martian Chronicles.
On the other